All right, so we start Unit 5 Agriculture this week. So we start with Unit 5, Lesson 1. That is the introduction to agriculture. So you kind of get basic understanding of different types of agriculture and where those different types of agriculture take place. So the objective for this one is for 5.1 is to explain the connection between physical geography and the agricultural practices. So that means why do they farm bananas in certain parts of the world, but they don't grow bananas here where we live? So agriculture practices are influenced by the physical environment and the climate. If you remember back, and I think it was in Unit 3 maybe on culture, we studied climate, and you guys did the maps. Right, so you're familiar with the climates a little bit: Mediterranean climate, tropical climate. Okay, there's such a thing as intensive farming practices, and they include market gardening, plantation agriculture, and mixed crop or livestock systems. And then there's extensive farming. Just remember that extensive farming is done on large areas of land. Okay, and that includes shifting cultivation and ranching. So we'll get into those as we go through. So this takes you to different types of zones, like climate zones and agricultural zones. And hopefully that comes up. And it should. So this is actually a PowerPoint from a different place, but I couldn't get the maps to come through with very good resolution. So this just shows you, right? So agricultural production regions refer to where it's practiced, right? So if you look at the United States, it looks a lot like our climate map, right? The pink part, right, in the Northeast is humid continental, where we're at. The green part underneath that is humid subtropical. That's literally just south of here. And then the brown is the semi-arid. We call that steppe. Okay, the arid is like a desert. Okay, and then the purple ones that are on there are highlands because they're up in the mountains. So and then there's a little bit of a Mediterranean over there as well, due to the fact that it's in Southern California. So there's a couple other maps that compare. Okay, so this does it as well. This shows the same climates, and you can see around the world are different things. So this is great because in certain climates on this map, you could grow certain things. So if you go to the middle of Africa in that light blue right there, well, that's a desert. So you're not hardly growing anything there. Well, of course, where we live, okay, there's going to be a lot different crops that are growing because of the climate that surrounds us. Now, there are ways that humans can interfere with that, right, in a positive way in order to grow more food and more products to be sold. So human modifications, ways that we can modify that, right, with space, with light, with water, with nutrients, with suitable temperatures. So like space-wise, you could cut down trees and make it farmland. Okay, you can increase the light in a greenhouse by magnifying it. You could add more water through irrigation. Okay, you could fertilize the land with nutrients. Okay, you could use a greenhouse again for more suitable temperatures, right? So this is environmental possibilism. That would mean that in a place like North Dakota, which typically is semi-arid, but in a developed country, okay, a more developed country like where we live, then you can irrigate that land because you have the money to do so. So since you can irrigate that, that's changing the water. That's a human modification. That's environmental possibilism. So it's not really possible to grow the crops that we grow in North Dakota, but it is possible because we can change the environment to make it happen. Okay. All right. So different types of farming, right? There's intensive farming. Intensive farming has lots of labor, okay, and capital. So it's expensive to do, but it takes a ton of intense labor and it happens in a small amount of space. So these are rice farmers, and it's really hard work to go through and harvest that rice. Like it takes a lot of people to go through and do that. If you look at the landscape on the left, right, they have changed that landscape, right? That's a cultural landscape in Southeast Asia. That could be in China, or that could be in South Korea. Okay, it could be in Japan, right? It's probably China, and it's where they're growing the rice. Well, that's not how those hills look under normal conditions, but they terrace. That's called terracing, Terrace, terracing. They're terracing that land so that they can then cultivate it, right? So they're making that more available. But that's a lot of work to get that and maintain that is super labor intensive, right? Intensive. So that's where that type of agriculture comes from, right? Okay, so extensive agriculture, there's not as much labor, but it takes a huge area to do it. It takes a lot of land. Okay, so just remember there's an extensive amount of land for this. Intensive is smaller amounts of land, extensive is more land. It does not require a ton of labor, right? Like a cattle rancher, you could have a few people working the cattle ranch that you see in the picture. So there's not as much labor to be done. Okay, but it's over an enormous amount of land. You could never do cattle ranching in an area like this. It wouldn't work. Okay, so that's why this is intensive and this is extensive, because you need an extensive amount of land to make it happen. Okay, commercial agriculture is what we see around here. Okay, and this is you grow the crops for sale off of the farm. Okay, the farming is integrated into a large food production industry or agribusiness. Okay, so an agribusiness around here would be an enormous farm that's operated by a big company that comes in and says, look, we're going to do this. We're going to increase yields. We're going to fertilize this. We're going to put some money into this so we can get more crops out of it. Okay, farms generally are large in size and most labor is done by the machines. Okay, so commercial agriculture would happen in more developed countries. So obviously this is something that we see around here. Heck, this guy's spraying chemicals on these crops. That's fertilizer, that's keeping the bugs away. Lots of doing things that's going to increase the yield, the amount of stuff that's actually produced. Okay, so that's commercial. Commercial is when you do it for more than just your family. Subsistence, right, is typically found in least developed or less developed countries. And this is production on small farms, okay, by the family, okay, and much of the labor is performed by the people that are going to eat the food. Okay, so in poorer areas, you have in the world, you have subsistence farming. Okay, so in less developed countries, you would have that. All right, so different types of crops, right? Grain crops, right? The climate type is usually steppe, and you can see on the map of the United States, that's in places like Kansas, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, right? Usually this is commercial farming. It's extensive because you can see in the picture, it takes up a large amount of land. Other places in the world, South Central Canada, just an extension north inside the United States. Eastern Europe does it too. And then you see the different types of grains: wheat, barley, corn, oats, rice, and millet. Rice and millet really wouldn't happen in the type of climates in the United States. Okay, at least in the western part of the U.S. Mixed crop and livestock, right? The key here is that you grow the crops to feed the livestock. Okay, so that's what it is around here. Like we see all the corn and stuff. Some of that corn, like the sweet corn, we can eat that, and we do. We could eat the other stuff too, but it doesn't taste very good. The other corn is given to the animals. Okay, that's why it's mixed crop and livestock, right? So this is done in a humid continental climate, humid subtropical climate. So that's pretty much the eastern part of the United States, right? Types and locations. It's commercial agriculture usually, and it's intensive. It's not always done on an enormous amount of land. It happens on the northern European plain, so that's like France, parts of Great Britain, and Germany, right? And that's where those farmlands are. So grown for feed, again, grown to feed the animals, and then that is another part of their production. So they make money on the animals as well as making money on the farm, on the crop itself. Okay, dairy farming, right? This is our climate type. This is why you see this around us. If you drive east to here 10 miles, you'll see it. Okay, it's done in humid continental. That's us. So the northeastern U.S., so this is influenced by the milk shed. What that means is the milk shed is the market. That's the distance you have to go to actually get your milk to market, so you get money for it. Okay, this is actually labor intensive because milking the cows is extremely labor intensive. Okay, growing the cows is extensive because you have a big area to do it. Excuse me. So milking them, though, is labor intensive because it does require a lot of work. Okay, so this is the areas in the world where this happens, and you can see the northeastern part of the U.S. here, and then the northern European plain in Europe, and then down on the southeastern coast of Australia, right, is where this would take place. All right, so livestock ranching, this happens in the steppe climate. Okay, this is the western U.S., This is over an extended area. You don't use the feed here. You feed these guys the grass that's there, and you can see the one guy on the horse at the bottom. Like, that's an idea that there's not as much labor, but you got to have an extended amount of area to do it. And then on the map there, you can see the different areas in the world where this would happen. So that steppe region in Asia over there. Remember when we did the heartland theory in Unit 4? Like, that's the heartland. That's just the land in that area is just like it is in the Midwestern part of the U.S. and the Western part of the U.S. It's really good for farming and this ranching stuff. So that's why it's important to have that land. Okay, shifting cultivation. This you don't see around here. They have rainforest, right? And so what happens in the rainforest is they cut them down, and you can see that in that bottom left picture. Okay, this is subsistence farming. These people are doing this for their own good, and it only lasts for 2 or 3 years. And after those 2 or 3 years, they just abandon the farmland and they move somewhere else. So they cut down all the trees in the rainforest in this little plot of land. They farm it, and then they leave it. Okay, so if you look on the maps, okay, on the map there, you can see the locations, right? In South America, that's the Amazon rainforest. Okay, in Africa, that's the equatorial rainforest, right? So those areas of the world is where this happens. So the land is cleared for planting. They slash and burn the vegetation. That's also called slash and burn farming. And then the ashes that are left behind help to fertilize the ground. Like I said, it works great for a little bit, but once those ashes and that fertilizer is gone, and then it rains a bunch, it washes all that stuff away. So that's not good for a long period of time. And then they just abandon it and go to a different part and build and cut that down and then do it again. So this is not good in numerous ways. Okay, intensive subsistence, wet rice dominant, right? So this happens in warm, wet winter climates like humid subtropical. In the southern part of the U.S., this would happen. You wouldn't see that picture on the left, but this in many parts of the world, if it's intensive subsistence, that means that these people are growing this food for just themselves. So southeastern China, eastern India, much of Southeast Asia, right? This is small farms. They double crop. They do 2 harvests, one from one piece of land. So rice will allow you to do that. It doesn't have there's a rotation of crops that has to be done around here. Like, you don't see corn growing on the same ground every year because that corn takes nutrients out of the ground. So the next year they plant soybeans, right? So that's crop rotation. They don't have to do that with rice because rice doesn't take anything from the ground. So, all right, so that's the areas of the world where that intensive subsistence, wet rice dominant climate is located. Okay, in those areas of the world. Okay, intensive subsistence, wet rice, not dominant. Okay, so the climate type here is humid subtropical, but not quite as much rain. Okay, so this is crop rotation. This isn't just straight rice. They do switch year to year, and it's wheat and barley and other grains. Okay, in milder climates. So this is intensive subsistence, wet rice, not dominant. Happens in different parts of the world, but it's different than this one, okay, because this is straight up the wet rice is the dominant thing. This is wet rice is not dominant. That's why they grow other crops like wheat, barley, and other grains. Okay, plantation agriculture. This is an imperialism, colonialism issue. So in places that were imperialized by Great Britain or by European nations, there's a lot of plantation agriculture. The idea is that it is subsistence and intensive. Latin America, Africa, Asia, they also, though, have commercial agriculture in this because they have huge plantations. And those plantations involve cash crops like sugarcane, tobacco, coffee, cacao, and palm oil. Like, they do this, and these are things that we all use all the time. But man, the people that make this make nothing. Like, they make next to nothing. But the people that own these plantations do really, really well. So if you think about Enrique, right, they had this same stuff in Honduras, but in Guatemala, but people like Enrique didn't make any money off of this. The people that own the land did, and there was very few people that had that. So plantation agriculture is tough economically because it doesn't do a lot for everyone. You can see on the map there where it takes place. Okay, in spots around the world, and a lot of those places were formerly colonized by the Europeans. Okay, so pastoral nomadism. okay, also known as nomadic herding, happens in the steppe and in the deserts. Okay, subsistence and extensive agricultural in Central Asia. Okay, so these are subsistence farmers that do this. Okay, and they often move, they don't stay in the same place. Okay, so that's why it's called nomadism, right? They don't have a permanent home. It depends on the animals instead of the crops. So their livelihood depends on the survival of the animals. So they go where the animals will do the best, right? So they're going from place to place. This is where this still occurs in the world. Um, it is not nearly as much as it used to be. The orange, brownish, whatever color that is, would have shrunk in lots of parts of the world because, man, it's a tough life doing this. So, okay, Mediterranean is by the Mediterranean Sea. That's the biggest area. So, and then in regions around the world where there's a Mediterranean climate, then they would have these types of things. So Mediterranean is like, think of Southern California, right? Or even better probably is to think about Florida, even though it's not a Mediterranean climate. But they grow things like citrus fruits, olives, grapes, okay? So figs, like I said, citrus fruits like lemons, oranges, okay, are in Mediterranean climates. So you can see the Mediterranean here. Okay, California, northern Baja, central Chile, right? That elongated state down there. Then you see the basin of the Mediterranean, and that's really the big area. Mediterranean's always by water, in case you haven't figured that out yet. Okay, so commercial or market gardening. This is in a humid subtropical climate because you need a lot of natural rain to do this. This is all commercial farming. It is intensive because it's on a small area. And these are usually fruits and vegetables. They're always fruits and vegetables, and they're sold fresh at the market. Most are sold to big processors, and then those processors do whatever they do with them. And Soulard Market in St. Louis is an example of one of these markets where people would take them, and that used to be way bigger than it is now, and have way more operators in it because farmers can make more money not selling directly to market. They can have guaranteed money going to bigger people, and then those bigger people box it, send it to grocery stores, right? But it's still considered market gardening. But this is definitely a commercial enterprise. The family doesn't eat this stuff. It's commercial. It's for money. Okay, so remember, the physical environment and the climate conditions determine what can be grown. We can use environmental determinism, right? We can alter this a little bit. You can irrigate the land. You can have a greenhouse. You can do these different things. But typically what can be grown depends on the climate and the land that you're on. Okay. All right. That brings us to the end of 5.1. Settlement patterns and survey methods are next. But 5.1 is the history of agriculture.